As we've just discussed, the bulk of the coverage of the post-Hurricane Ian aftermath is not about the people who were devastated and putting their lives back together and their communities back together. No, it's all about electoral politics. You know, back with Katrina, we had a Republican president and a Democrat governor and mayor, so of course the Republican had to be blamed. And now we have a Democrat president and a Republican governor, and guess what? It's the Republican who's being blamed. Well, were the right calls made? Were calls delayed on evacuation? Is the aid getting to the people who need it? How about we go to the source? Here's Congressman Mike Waltz. Michael Waltz is a congressman of Florida. He's down in Florida right now. And let's just go right into the politics of it, Congressman. Can you explain to me all of the second guessing about whether counties should have evacuated and shouldn't, and whose decision is it, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Larry. Good to be with you. And yeah, for all the prognosticating about what Governor DeSantis did or didn't do, it's ignorant of the fact that in Florida, the county officials make the final evacuation calls. It's a very big state. We get a lot of storms, and it's a bottoms-up system. So that's point one. And then point two, of course, they want to hit him from a climate perspective. And if you actually look at his record, he created the state's first ever chief resiliency officer. He created $1 billion resiliency fund, a chief science officer to deal with red tide and other types of issues we've been having. So it's politics at its worst. We're coming together as Floridians. We're coming together as Americans. Thank God for our first responders, for our National Guard, for our Coast Guard that have been delivering aid. Southwest Florida is just devastated, and they're doing everything they can. My district was in the other side on the East Coast that was also heavily flooded. The wind wasn't as bad, but the flooding has been historic. The FEMA designations have come from the administration, and we're getting people the help they need. Yeah,
and it's a time when everybody should be cooperating to try to get that help done. And then let's not forget, I mean, short of evacuating every single county on the Gulf Coast, the predictions were made. I was told it was going to be Tampa was going to be the worst. And I don't remember anybody saying that Lee County was going to be hit the hardest by it. Because this is not only is it a large state population-wise and managed, as you just said, on the county level in terms of evacuations, geographically it's a very large state.
Yeah, 24 hours out, Larry, Lee and Charlotte County were under a tropical storm warning, right? And Ian took a hard right turn and surprised everyone. That said, the county officials did 24 hours out get an evacuation order in place. And we're dealing with it now the best we can.
Yeah, you mentioned our heroes, the first responder heroes, which then they obviously are. And specifically, I make note of a gentleman named Zach Lash. He is a hero in the United States Coast Guard. He's one of these guys who drop from helicopters in the middle of these disasters, swim to a victim, someone who needs saving, harnesses them up, and then carries them to safety. He did an extraordinary feat after Hurricane Ian hit in Florida. He even got a phone call from the President of the United States. But Congressman Waltz, I know that you're focused on Mr. Lash's story because he actually has to leave the Coast Guard because of President Biden's vaccine mandate. This can't be real.
Yeah, apparently it is. And I could tell you what is real is that the disabled woman in her wheelchair that he strapped to himself after swimming through debris, risking electrocution and other harm to save her, she didn't care. She wasn't asking, "Oh, do you have your vaccine or not?"
Yeah.
Before he lifted her out. But here's the thing, Larry. There's 2,600 Coast Guardsmen and women that are in this position that are facing discharge. And even down in Florida, we have over 1,000 members of the Florida National Guard that have been out on the front line since day one. Many of them have natural immunity, but the Biden's Defense Department isn't taking that into account. And here's why this just is absolutely asinine and it doesn't make sense. The policy's not adjusting with what we understand about this vaccine. The vaccine does not stop the spread. CDC has admitted that. The president has said it's over, but for whatever reason that I'm determined to figure out, that officials in the Pentagon are dug in, and we are on the cusp of discharging nearly 20,000 members of the military, and that's multiple divisions worth. While by the way, we face a recruiting crisis and a massive military buildup from China. It defies common sense. When we take over the House in just a little over a month, we're going to start legislating this problem. I mean, These people won't get their retirement benefits. They've had honorable service. They're not getting even an honorable discharge. It's just ridiculous on the face of it.
It is. And
Yeah,
Congressman Waltz, you're a retired Green Beret from the United States Army, and you served overseas in combat. And as always, thank you for your service. But you know this stuff. You know what our military is capable of and what they need to be at their ready. At this point, in your opinion, is President Biden's vaccine mandate in the military affecting our readiness?
Oh, it's going to devastate our readiness, Larry. I mean, the military's lost less than 100 people by the last count I saw. They've lost more in car accidents than they have to COVID. But yet we're going to lose the skill sets in service of over 20,000. And oh, by the way, this is the youngest and healthiest population probably in America. Right. That's the least susceptible to it. I mean, it really, I can't think of anything more asinine.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, with the recruiting crisis, they can't replace these folks.
Congressman, I also understand that Mr. Lash, like so many other people in the military, they put forth a request for a religious exemption. That's the reason why Mr. Lash didn't want to get the vaccine. And the military denied his religious exemption. I don't know about you. I'm very uncomfortable with the military or anyone in the federal government basically saying to an individual citizen, no, we don't find your religious belief valid. That's really what they're saying when they deny a religious exemption, aren't they?
This religious exemption process is a sham. And that's not just, me kind of being over the top. I've talked to general officers off the record, people throughout the system. It is a rubber stamp process. Not a single one has been approved. Yeah. It just automatically gets it denied from this White House and from this Pentagon. So it's a slap in the face of people's religious convictions. And again, it's going to gut our military at the time we need it the most.
This leads us, Congressman Waltz, you mentioned the majority, the Republicans taking the majority in the midterm elections coming up here. And we saw the leadership, Kevin McCarthy, put forth the agenda for Americans should Republicans get the majority. Frankly, and I want all the assistance on the economy, all of the great things to stop spending, all great stuff. I also want investigations. Democrats are really good at these investigations. And I think just the two things you mentioned there, the vaccine mandates and what's going on at the Pentagon with regard to enforcing them and the effects of it. And also, Congressman Waltz, I am shocked to learn there's never really been an effective investigation and congressional hearing about the disastrous pullout from Afghanistan. What do you want to see done there if you happen to be in the majority this next term?
Well, we are going to be in the majority, and I am going to get to the bottom of what happened in Afghanistan. I've served multiple tours there, was heavily involved in helping so many veterans groups, these grassroots groups who stepped up to evacuate their fellow Americans and our allies, which is what the State Department and the Defense Department should have been doing. So, look, most of all, those 13 Gold Star families deserve accountability. They had lost their loved one to a suicide bomber, number one, because their loved one, their military member, was told to defend an airport in the middle of 4 million people in the middle of an unplanned evacuation. And then number two, the suicide bomber was let out of prison at Bagram Air Base just 2 weeks prior. So there are so many things to answer. I know the military gave Biden different advice that he ended up ignoring. But on top of the Afghanistan debacle, we haven't had a single hearing under Nancy Pelosi on the origin of COVID. We are going to get to the bottom of what Chinese companies Hunter Biden owns and what percentage goes to the big guy, not to mention their influence and compromise of him. And we have to get to the bottom of what's happening at the border. And, oh, by the way, weaponizing the FBI and the Justice Department against parents who care what their kids are taught at school. So, man, wow. The list is long.
And it's my list. It's like you're reading my notes. I think you hacked into my phone. Representative Michael Waltz, that's music to my ears, and I know to a lot of Republican voters who were looking for a reason to get out there and vote and give you the majority in just a few weeks. Thank you for joining us from Florida, and our prayers for everyone there as they continue this cleanup process.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Talk to you soon.
More to come here on O'Connor Tonight.